now, my colleague Pierre from Headlines Today has something planned for you. We are very quickly going to do a quick check on all of you on what exactly is your MindRush quotient. Pierre, over to you.
Here? Not yet. Oh, here we go. Thanks, Shweta. So for the past couple of years, Business Today has been running this special issue called The Best Advice I Got. It's been doing fantastically. Readers love it. It's been doing great online as well. And we thought that with the 100 business leaders in the room tonight, why don't we get some of you to talk about the best advice you received and share that with the audience over here. We have 3 people who volunteered to get things rolling. And then I'm going to open it up to the floor, and if anyone has advice, personal or professional, as Mr. Murthy said, work-life balance is important. We'd be glad to take you on as well. But I'll start over here right in front, Mr. Vaidyanathan, who is from Capital First, completed the largest management buyout just last year, $250 million with Warburg Pincus. Transforming from a professional for several decades to an entrepreneur, what was that like? What kind of advice did you get? And if we could have you up.
Okay. When I left ICICI Bank, I actually went and the first person I met is Mr. Narayan Murthy. Within actually 2 days of my leaving, I was there at his office. He was earlier on the board of ICICI Bank, and I thought I'll first go across to him and seek his advice as I move on. He made one comment to me which those days, which hold stead to me even today. He said, be careful of the company you keep. It's going to define you as the days go by. To me, it was really a very useful comment because a couple of years later, when I was in the situation of figuring out whom to tie up with and where to get funds from to complete the buyout, I went across to Mr. K.V. Kamath at that time, also for his advice. And 2 people say the same thing. He said, be careful about the company you keep, deal with good people. And actually, while we were still figuring out whom to deal with, I think in the end, it did definitely swing my mind to then, as much as possible, convince Warburg Pincus to fund us. And then, frankly, we are very, very delighted after that.
I'm also wondering if there was a time when you wish you had that advice in the past, and sometimes it didn't work out for you, maybe because you didn't have that advice when you did.
Well, the corporate India is littered with a large number of such stories, right? Where people are very successful, have scorching careers, they just progress far ahead in life, but then just association with the wrong people, maybe a stockbroker who leads you away, Rajratnam at or McKinsey Rajat Gupta is a fabulous example, right, for many of us to learn from, and just probably fabulous people, great careers. One false move, one wrong company, it just undoes their whole life. So if there's one thing I want to remember, will certainly be this message for my life.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vaidyanathan. You are the company you keep, as they say. We have Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik, the chairman of Microsoft, over here as well. You've been in the industry more than 35 years and lots of experience. I'm sure you have.
42 years in counting.
There you go. I'm sure you have plenty of advice, but something that you'd like to share with the audience over here.
Actually, I've got a couple. So one is the best advice I got was from Nandan Nilekani, who when Infosys decided to go public, insisted that I buy Infosys shares. That was perhaps one of the best advice I ever received. But, you know, in a more weightier tone, I spent about 10 years of my life working for the Tatas with a company called Nelco. And at that time, Mr. Ratan Tata was the chairman. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was I was about, 28 or 29 years old, and he actually sent me to the US to tie up a collaboration with an American company called Quantel. This was the era of mini computers. And I asked him, what is my brief? And he says, I leave it to you to decide, but remember one thing. Whenever you build a relationship with another organization, then make sure that both sides make money. And to me, that actually is a very valuable, very, very valuable, advice which I've got, which I've used, not just between, when you try to build, relationships with organizations, but it's also about how you build relationships with others. It's always about how you add value to that relationship.
Has there ever been an occasion where you've backed out of a deal because you believe there was no value being added?
Absolutely. I've got some great stories around that. But I don't think I'd like to share that out here.
Thanks very much. And finally, I just want to remind you, we have one more volunteer, and then we'll open it up to the floor. So if anyone has advice they'd like to share, keep it rolling, and I'll come to you in just a minute. Ajay Kaul is the CEO of Domino's in India. The company needs no introduction, absolutely. You've spent a career in many different industries, sir, and now in the food industry. Tell us about the advice that you treasure the most.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for this opportunity. I think we have had a couple of outstanding business advisors. I would go to an advice which came at a personal level, but which has got, to my mind, big ramifications even for business. You know, most of these advices at personal level you get during your childhood. Parents are dominant contributors to that. I'll go back to something which happened just 3 or 4 years back. After having done all what you said, we were trying to take our company public, and at least for me, taking a company public was a big thing at the time. It was something which you had kind of almost dreamt or thought all your life. Unfortunately, the time when we were trying to go public and we were trying to announce it, my dad was also detected with life-threatening cancer. And it so happened that the days of our road shows, and this was January, a few years back, was exactly coinciding with the days when he was having his therapies. I would literally, finish my road show in a country, be back, go straight to a hospital, spend the night with him, and next morning I would be flying again. So it was almost like, hell and heaven coexisted. One of the toughest, I would arguably say the toughest period of my life. We went public, we got listed on February 7th, and my dad actually expired just 7 or 8 days before that. So it was as bad as that. But let me come to the main story. A few days before, he expired, and he knew all this was happening. My mom didn't understand a lot of this going public and all that. And he was the only one who could have actually come and patted me on the back and said, hey, you are doing a great job. And he was in a position, he was bedridden. He called me one day, and this was just 4 or 5 days before he died. And he couldn't even, speak well, so he actually eventually wrote it on a piece of paper. And what he told me is that, listen, son, you've come a long way, and a lot of good things have happened to you. The only thing I can tell you, and I don't know whether I'll be there when the good thing will happen, is never, ever, leave your feet off the ground. Always be human. And that's the words he wrote on that piece of paper. Always continue being a good human being before anything else. And he was trying to also give me a context that, your public issue may do well. You may get into maybe company of things, which I just heard, which is not the right company. But never ever, continue not being a good human being. I think it's got huge business ramifications. As contexts change, as references change, things which you have learned in your childhood, which are, at an impressionable age, which become almost a part of your bloodstream, sometimes context can challenge that. And you may kind of feel that you are now in a different context, so the same rules don't apply. But there are some fundamental things which, should never leave you. And one of them I learned from my dad was, continue being a good human being, irrespective of how successful you are and so on. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kaul. And that's great advice, but business is all about relationships and how you live them. So I'm going to throw it open to the floor. We have time for a bit to do that. Your name, sir, and
my name is Harminder Sani from Wazir Advisors, and see, one gets a lot of advice as a child, as a professional, and one of the best which I would like to share is, so when I was much younger and one day I came back home, I was very unhappy with somebody who has managed to score better than I did at the school, and my grandmother, she said a very simple thing. She said that it's good that somebody has beaten you and somebody has done well, because they also had to have their chance. Now we have only 2 options. Either you can be envious or you can be inspired. So I think that was the best advice I ever got, that you better be inspired, and just now Mr. Murthy has left, but I just saw the real example of that. Even Mr. Murthy, he said that he is inspired by what TCS is achieving and Mr. Chandrasekhar is doing. And even at that level, he is applying that same advice which I got. And I think it can be applied throughout one's life. So that's the one I would like to share with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you like to say?
I'm Arun Bajoria from JK Tires. Similar thing that the gentleman has just said. When I started my career with Texmaco in Calcutta, they offered me 450 rupees a month. This was in 1965, January. And there was another guy who was recommended by a very, very high minister. I would not like to take the name. And he was given 550 rupees per month. And I was one of the toppers from BITS Pilani, and this guy was from some regional engineering college. So I wrote a letter to my father and I said, look, this is how it is, and I'm very, very heartbroken and that kind of thing. And he immediately wrote back and he said, look, desiring is not enough. You must deserve it too. Don't worry, this is the beginning. So I think it had a lot of meaning in it.
Anyone else? Absolutely. Good evening. I am Anil Chopra. I am the CEO of Bajaj Capital for last 29 years. And I would like to narrate an incident which happened about 10 years ago in 2003. I had the opportunity of having a breakfast with Mr. K.V. Kamath, who was then the chairman of ICICI Bank. And it was in Sydney near the Opera House. And it was just by coincidence that I was just sitting next to him on the breakfast table, and I just asked him, sir, would you like to just tell me quickly as to how one should plan one's time and how one should divide one's time? So his answer was very quick, very crisp. He said, spend 33% time with your clients, spend 33% time with your team, with your people, and spend the balance 33% time with yourself. And that was a defining moment in my life. Because when I did my own calculation, I found I was spending 60% time with my own people and 20% time with principals and then rest in routine. So after that, I made it a point to follow his advice right to the minute. And I think that was very, very useful. And another thing which he shared with me was that we go to our conferences of our own profession. I am a financial planner by profession, and I have been to conferences in Australia, Singapore, UK, US, wherever it happens. He said, try going to a conference of another profession. For example, go to a doctor's conference. You know, you're not a doctor, you will not understand, but just go there and see what they're talking about. Go to, maybe historian's conference. And I've tried that twice, going to IT conference and some other conference, and that's really, really useful. So I think I've been greatly benefited by those 15, 20 minutes I spent with Mr. K.V. Kamath. Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else for sharing advice? So I'll go back there and then come again. Sorry.
Hi, good evening. My name is Nishant Rao. I have the privilege of managing LinkedIn's business here in India. And it's advice that I got from my father, which was passed on from my grandfather, Dr. K. Rao. The advice was around the fact that leadership is about doing the right thing when no one is looking. And, it's kind of, that's something that got passed on to me early. As I went through my career, I never really fully internalized the value of it. And as I was taking on this assignment at LinkedIn, one of our values is act like an owner. And, in one of the instances that I went through, this really came to life. And the fact that I did and did not do something in that moment mattered a great amount to the team, and it really hit me hard. It kind of came back to stories that I heard as a child of, doing the right thing when no one else is looking. And somehow the team picks up on it without you realizing it.
It's a lesson in personal integrity as well. Thank you very much, Nishant.